The Glass Beneath Her Feet, Part 1. The House of Forgetting. There are houses in this city that swallow people whole. Not dramatically, no screaming, no struggle. Just a slow fade into the wallpaper until you can't remember what color your own eyes are. Ella lived in one of those houses. She hadn't always been invisible. There were photographs to prove it. A girl with dark hair and her mother's smile. Standing in front of a modest apartment with window boxes full of herbs. Her mother had believed in small beautifications, little resistances against the gray sprawl of the city, basil and mint. Flowers that closed at night and opened to whatever sun managed to slip between the buildings. That was before her father remarried. Ella's father had been a kind man made stupid by loneliness. After her mother died, suddenly, a stroke at 39, while arranging tulips in a vase. He'd wandered through the world like someone looking for a door. He'd forgotten how to open. He found Victoria instead. Victoria was elegant in the way that expensive things are elegant, cold, precise, untouchable. She ran a consulting firm that specialized in optimization, which seemed to mean making things smaller and harder until they could be controlled. She had 2 daughters from her first marriage. Lydia, who studied law and spoke in paragraph form, and Margot, who collected vintage designer pieces and treated human beings like they were slightly shabby furniture. She was considering reupholstering. When Ella's father died, a heart attack, quiet and efficient, like he was apologizing for the inconvenience, the house changed around her. Not the physical space, the emotional architecture. At first, it was subtle. Her stepmother would forget to set a place for her at dinner. Her stepsisters would make plans and simply not mention them. Ella would enter a room and the conversation would continue as if she hadn't. She told herself she was being paranoid, that grief made everything feel like rejection. But then came the morning. She looked in the mirror and couldn't quite make out her own reflection. It was there technically. She could see the shape of a person, the ghost of features. But it was like trying to focus on something in peripheral vision. The harder she looked, the less certain she became. That was when she understood she was disappearing, not dying. Worse, becoming a function instead of a person, a thing that cleaned and organized and maintained, invisible labor that kept the house running while the people inside it lived their visible, important lives. Lydia was studying for the bar exam. She would spend 16 hours a day at the dining table, surrounded by annotated casebooks and color-coded notes. And Ella would bring her coffee at precise intervals, replace her pens when they ran dry, adjust the lamp when the light grew dim. Lydia never looked up. Not once. Margot was worse, because she sometimes did see Ella. Saw her the way you might notice a stain on a blouse, or a chip in a wine glass. Something to be corrected. She would stand in the hallway and critique the way Ella folded towels, the angle at which she'd hung a picture, the fact that her presence itself was somehow aesthetically displeasing. "You're so drab," Margaret said once, tilting her head like she was considering a painting she didn't quite understand. "It's almost aggressive, how aggressively plain you are." Ella had tried to defend herself, but the words came out quiet and uncertain, and Margot had already turned away, her attention sliding off Ella like water off glass. Victoria was the worst, because Victoria knew exactly what was happening. She would look at Ella sometimes with a small, satisfied smile, the way an accountant might look at a balanced spreadsheet. Everything in its place. Everything performing its function. Ella tried to leave. She had some money saved from before. Her mother's life insurance, kept in an account her father had set up for college. But when she went to the bank, the teller looked right through her. She filled out withdrawal slips, presented her identification, spoke clearly and firmly, but the teller's eyes kept sliding away, focusing on the person behind her in line. She tried to apply for jobs, but her applications disappeared into silence. She went to interviews where the interviewer would forget she was there mid-conversation, would start answering phone calls or checking email while she was speaking. Once, a hiring manager actually locked the office and left while Ella was still sitting in the waiting room. She tried to make friends, to connect with people outside the house. But conversations would die when she approached. People would literally forget her name between one sentence and the next. She went to a support group for grief and spent an hour sharing her story, only to have the facilitator ask, at the end, if anyone wanted to speak for the first time. The city itself seemed to be forgetting her. She would stand at crosswalks and cars wouldn't stop. She would enter stores and staff would walk past her like she was a mannequin. She started to understand that whatever was happening to her wasn't just in her head or even in the house. It was deeper, older. She was becoming a story people told themselves to feel better about not helping. The invisible woman. The one they didn't see. The one it was easier not to notice. At night, alone in the small room under the stairs that had become hers after her father died, Ella would press her hands against her face to make sure she was still solid. She would speak her own name aloud, Ella. 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 Each repetition felt like an argument she was losing. She started keeping a journal, writing down everything she did, everything she thought, as proof she existed. But some mornings she would wake up and not recognize her own handwriting. Or she'd turn to a page she knew she'd written and find it blank. The house was eating her, or she was fading into it. or the world had decided she wasn't important enough to remember. And the worst part, the part that made her want to scream, except she'd forgotten what her own screams sounded like, was that she couldn't remember exactly when it had started. When had she stopped being Ella and started being the girl who did laundry? When had her stepfamily stopped saying her name? When had she last seen her own eyes clearly in a mirror? There were good days, days when she felt almost present. She would find tasks that required precision and lose herself in them, organizing the spice cabinet alphabetically, color, coding Victoria's closet, alphabetizing the books in her stepsister's rooms. In those moments, she felt the shape of herself return, defined by what she could control. But those moments never lasted. One evening in late autumn, as Ella was scrubbing the kitchen floor on her hands and knees, even though they had a cleaning service, there were always additional tasks, invisible maintenance. She heard her stepsisters talking in the next room. "Did you hear about the autumn ball?" Lydia's voice, precise and excited in a way it rarely was. "Everyone's talking about it," Margaret replied. "It's supposed to be the event of the season. Very exclusive, very old money. Mother got us invitations through one of her clients. Apparently, the prince himself is expected to attend." Ella sat back on her heels listening. The prince. She knew who they meant. Everyone in the city did. He was one of those people who existed in the collective imagination more than in reality, young, wealthy, beautiful in an almost supernatural way, and cursed with a kind of fame that made him more symbol than human. His name was actually Sebastian, but people rarely used it. He was always the prince, even though the city had no royalty, no monarchy. He'd inherited his title the way some people inherit trauma, from a family that had been important for so long that importance had calcified into identity. "What's the point?" Margot was saying. "He won't remember us anyway. You know what they say about him. That's just a rumor. Is it?" Sophie went to that charity gala last spring, and she said, "He danced with her for half an hour. Completely engaged, asked her all these questions about her work. Then a week later, she saw him at the opera, introduced herself, and he had no idea who she was. Blank. Total blank." Ella felt something shift in her chest. Recognition, maybe, or kinship. The idea of someone who couldn't hold on to people, who lost them even as he met them. It was like her own invisibility inverted. He was too seen, too bright, and it burned away everyone who got close. She didn't think about the ball again until 3 days later, when an envelope arrived. It was thick and cream-colored, the kind of paper that probably cost more than Ella's monthly food budget. Victoria opened it at breakfast with theatrical pleasure, her manicured fingers slicing through the wax seal. "Girls," she said, and her voice had the quality of an announcement. "We've been invited to the autumn ball. All three of us." Lydia and Margot erupted into excited chatter. Ella, standing by the coffee maker, felt the words hit her like a physical weight. All three of us. Not four. She hadn't been counted. But then Victoria's eyes slid toward her. Not quite to her, but in her general direction, and she smiled. "Ella, dear, you'll stay home, of course. Someone needs to maintain the house. And besides," she gestured vaguely, "it's not really appropriate for you." Ella opened her mouth. She wanted to ask what wasn't appropriate. She wanted to demand, to know why she had been erased from the count, excluded so casually. But the words caught in her throat, shapeless and heavy, and Victoria had already turned away. The next 2 weeks were a fever dream of preparation. The house became a laboratory of transformation. Dresses arrived in glossy boxes, makeup artists appeared like magicians, hairstylists worked miracles with heat and chemical precision. Lydia and Margot moved through it all with the confidence of people who knew they deserved beauty, who understood it as their birthright. Ella watched from the margins, doing what she always did. Steaming dresses, polishing shoes, running last-minute errands for forgotten accessories. She was the infrastructure that allowed beauty to happen, invisible and essential. The night of the ball arrived cold and clear. Ella helped her stepsister's dress, zipping Lydia into a severe black gown that made her look like a beautiful knife, fastening the clasp on Margot's vintage emerald necklace. Victoria wore burgundy silk that probably cost more than a semester of college tuition. They left at 7:30, trailing perfume and excitement. The house fell silent behind them. Ella stood in the kitchen, surrounded by discarded makeup wipes and empty champagne bottles from the pre-party toast, and felt the quiet settle over her like snow. She should clean up. She should start the dishes, take out the trash, prepare for their return. Instead, she walked to her room and sat on the edge of her narrow bed, hands in her lap, and let herself feel the full weight of her erasure. That was when she heard it. A sound like wind chimes, or breaking glass, or a question being asked in a language she almost remembered. She looked up. In the corner of her room, where there had been nothing a moment before, stood a woman. Part 2. The price of being seen. The woman was old in a way that had nothing to do with age. Her face was smooth, but her eyes were ancient, and she wore clothes that seemed to shift between contemporary and timeless. A gray coat that might have been a cloak, a scarf that might have been woven from moonlight. "You've been waiting a long time," the woman said. Her voice was kind but not gentle. There was an edge to it, like sympathy sharpened to a point. Ella found her own voice, barely. "Who are you?" "I have many names. You can call me grandmother." Everyone does eventually. I don't understand. The woman, grandmother, moved closer. And Ella realized she left no footprints on the dusty floor. You're owed a debt, she said simply. The world has taken from you visibility, voice, presence. You've been erased so completely that you're starting to slip between the cracks of reality itself. Do you feel it? The way you're becoming less every day. Ella's hands were shaking. Yes. Good. Awareness is the first payment. Payment for what? Grandmother smiled, and it was not a reassuring expression. For being seen again. For existing in a way people can't ignore. For one night of absolute presence. She paused. I can give you that. But magic always costs something. And the price is never small. What would it cost me? Time, grandmother said. Memory. Future. Every spell I cast takes something from the caster. I've lived a very long time by other people's standards. But each magic I perform shortens my existence. When you're as old as I am, time becomes the only currency that matters. Ella stared at her. Why would you do that for me? Because you're owed. Because the scales need to balance. Because girls like you, invisible girls, forgotten girls, girls the world has decided don't matter. You accumulate debt in the cosmic ledger. And sometimes that debt needs to be paid. Grandmother's expression softened slightly. I don't create happy endings, child. I maintain equilibrium. You've suffered enough erasure that the universe owes you visibility. I'm just an accountant. And what do I have to pay? Your choice, grandmother said. At the end of the night, you'll have to choose return to mortality, to being forgotten, to this half life you're living. Or step fully into magic, become part of the other world, and never be invisible again, but never be quite human either. Ella thought about the years ahead. The slow fade, the increasing impossibility of her own existence. She thought about dying unnamed, unremarked, a person who had never quite been a person. I accept, she said. Grandmother nodded once, sharp and final. Then she raised her hand, and the room changed. The air thickened with possibility. Light bent around Ella like water, and she felt something shift in the fundamental structure of herself. Not transformation. Recognition. As if the universe was finally, reluctantly, admitting she existed. The autumn ball, grandmother said, exists outside normal time. The palace appears only once a year, between dusk and midnight, in the space between what is and what might be. It's where the city keeps its dreams, where impossible things are briefly possible. I don't have anything to wear, Ella said, and immediately felt stupid. But grandmother smiled. You're still thinking too literally. She touched Ella's shoulder, and Ella looked down. She was wearing a dress that seemed to be made of twilight, deep blue fading to silver, with fabric that moved like water or smoke. It wasn't beautiful in a conventional way. It was unsettling, magnetic, the kind of beauty that made people uncomfortable because they couldn't look away. "This isn't about making you pretty," grandmother said. "It's about making you impossible to ignore. When you wear this, people will see you, really see you. You'll exist so intensely that they won't be able to help but notice." Ella looked at her hands. They were solid now, completely present, more real than they'd been in months. "And these," grandmother said. On Ella's feet were slippers made of glass. Clear, fragile, impossibly delicate. Ella could see her own feet through them, could see the floor beneath. They looked like they would shatter if she took a single step. "What are they?" "Binding charms. Vessels that hold identity." Grandmother's voice was serious now. "As long as you wear both, you exist. You are Ella. You are seen, known, remembered. But if one breaks," she paused, "if one shatters, you're erased from memory. Everyone who saw you will forget. You'll slip back into invisibility, but deeper this time, permanent. Why glass? Why make them so fragile?" "Because important things should be fragile. Because you need to remember that visibility is not a right. It's a negotiation. Because you need to be careful." Grandmother's eyes were very dark. "And because at midnight, when the spell ends, you'll need to choose whether to break them yourself." "What happens at midnight?" "The palace closes. The between space collapses. If you're still inside when that happens, you become part of it. You'll be trapped there, slowly transforming into one of the palace's permanent fixtures. A statue, a painting, a ghost in the ballroom. You'll exist forever, but only in that single moment, that one night, repeated endlessly." Ella felt cold despite the dress. "How do I leave?" "Run. Before the last bell. Before the night fully ends." Grandmother stepped back. "A car is waiting outside. It will take you to the palace. It will bring you home. But only if you leave before midnight." "How will I know when it's time?" "Oh, you'll know. The bells will ring. The world will start to close like a book, and you'll have to choose. Run back to your invisible life, or stay in the dream forever." Ella wanted to ask more questions, wanted to understand the rules completely, but grandmother was already fading, becoming translucent, her edges blurring into the shadows of the room. "One more thing." The old woman's voice came, distant now. "The prince, Sebastian, he's cursed too, in his way. He remembers conversations, moments, the shape of connection, but faces blur. Names disappear. He's looking for something he's lost. Something he can't quite remember. You'll recognize that in him. And he'll recognize it in you." Then she was gone, and Ella was alone in her room, wearing an impossible dress and fragile glass slippers. With a choice she didn't fully understand, hanging over her like a sword. She walked carefully to the front door. each step a small terror, certain the slippers would shatter, and found a car waiting. Not a pumpkin transformed by magic, just a car. Black, expensive, real. The driver nodded to her without speaking, and she got in. The city at night looked different through the car window. Softer. More possible. Like someone had turned down the volume on its harshness. They drove through neighborhoods Ella recognized, but had never felt welcome in. Past buildings that glowed with warm light and the promise of lives being fully lived. And then, as they turned a corner, the palace appeared. It wasn't there. And then it was. Like her eyes had been refusing to focus on it, and suddenly gave up and let her see. The palace was beautiful in a way that hurt. Old architecture, married to contemporary design. Glass and stone, tradition and innovation. It seemed to exist slightly out of phase with the rest of the city, occupying a space that wasn't quite here or there. The car stopped. The driver opened her door. Ella stepped out onto the street, and her glass slippers made no sound at all against the pavement. She could hear music, something orchestral and strange, like a waltz played by people who were remembering it from a dream. She could see other people arriving, women in expensive gowns, men in tailored suits. Everyone moving with the confidence of people who belonged. Ella took a breath. Then she walked toward the entrance, and the crowd parted for her. Not consciously. They didn't choose to move. But they saw her, truly saw her, and their bodies made space. She felt their eyes on her, felt their attention like weight, like proof of existence. A doorman looked directly at her, made eye contact, spoke to her. "Good evening." "Miss, good evening," she said, and her voice was her own, clear and certain. She was inside. The ballroom was impossible. Too large for the building that contained it. Too beautiful for the ordinary world. The ceiling disappeared into darkness, scattered with what might have been stars. The floor was polished to mirror brightness, and everywhere, people moved in patterns that suggested dancing, but felt more like ritual. Ella stood at the edge, overwhelmed. This was real. She was here. She was seen. And then, across the room, she saw him. Part 3. The Prince Who Remembers. Nothing. Sebastian stood in the center of the ballroom like the eye of a hurricane, still and focused, while everything whirled around him. He was beautiful the way expensive things are beautiful, well made, carefully maintained, slightly remote. Dark hair, dark eyes, a face that photographers loved because it gave them nothing personal to work with. He was dancing with someone. A woman in a red dress who laughed too loudly at something he'd said. But even from across the room, Ella could see the distance in his eyes. He was performing presence while being fundamentally absent. She understood that. The music changed. The woman in red was replaced by someone else, and Sebastian continued dancing with the same polite smile, the same careful attention, the same ultimate blankness. Ella watched him cycle through partners. Each woman approached with hope, or calculation, or simple curiosity, and each one left looking slightly confused, like they'd had a conversation that evaporated the moment it ended. She was debating whether to approach, whether she wanted to be another forgotten face in his collection. When he looked up and saw her, actually saw her, his expression changed. Not much. A small crease between his eyebrows, a shift in focus. Like someone trying to remember a word that was just out of reach. He excused himself from his current partner and walked toward Ella. The crowd parted for him the way it had parted for her. Two people the world had agreed to notice. "I know you," he said when he reached her. His voice was rougher than she'd expected, more real. "Don't I?" "We've never met," Ella said. "No, I know we haven't. But I recognize something." He tilted his head, studying her face. "You're different." "Different how?" "Usually, I can't." He paused, choosing words carefully. "I have a condition. I remember conversations perfectly. I can recall everything someone tells me. But faces blur. Names disappear. I've danced with hundreds of women at these events, and I couldn't pick one of them out of a crowd the next day. It's like trying to hold water." "That sounds lonely," Ella said quietly. Sebastian laughed, and it was a sad sound. "It is. But I can see your face. Clearly. I'll remember it. That's never happened before. Maybe you're just having a good night." "Maybe." But he didn't sound convinced. "Will you dance with me?" Ella looked at the dance floor, at her fragile glass slippers, at all the ways this could go wrong. Then she looked at Sebastian's face. Really looked at him. Saw the exhaustion beneath the beauty, the isolation beneath the charm. "Yes," she said. He offered his hand. She took it, and they moved onto the floor. Dancing with Sebastian was like having a conversation in a language she was just learning to speak. He was technically perfect. Every step precise, but there was something mechanical about it. Like he'd learned the movements, but forgotten why people danced in the first place. "What's your name?" he asked as they turned. "Ella, Ella, Ella," he repeated, testing it. "I'll remember that." "I don't know why, but I will." "You said you remember conversations. What do people usually talk to you about?" "Themselves, mostly. Their careers, their connections, their carefully crafted anecdotes. Or they try to impress me with how much they know about my family, my company, my public persona. No one asks me questions." "What would you want them to ask?" He thought about it, still moving through the dance with mechanical precision. "What I'm afraid of. What I want. What I'd be doing if I wasn't here." He looked at her. "What about you? What do you want?" "To be remembered," Ella said, and the honesty of it surprised her. That's it. Just remembered? You have no idea what it's like to be forgotten while you're still standing there. To speak and have your words disappear. To exist in a way that doesn't count. She felt the glass slippers against her feet, fragile and essential. I've been invisible for so long that remembering me feels like the most radical thing anyone could do. Sebastian's grip on her hand tightened slightly. I forget everyone, every face, every name. But I remember the shape of conversations, the feeling of connection. And then it's gone, and I'm alone again, surrounded by people I've already met but can't recognize. So we're both ghosts, Ella said. You can't hold on to people. I can't make them hold on to me. Maybe that's why I can see you. You're already used to being forgotten. There's nothing to lose. They danced in silence for a while, moving through the other couples like water through stone. The music was strange. Something classical but played wrong, or right but in a way that made it unfamiliar. The other dancers seemed less real than they should be, like background characters in someone else's story. What are you afraid of? Ella asked, remembering his earlier words. Sebastian didn't answer immediately. They turned, stepped, turned again. Finally, disappearing, not dying. That would be too simple. Just fading until there's nothing left but the performance. The smile. The small talk. The carefully maintained persona. And somewhere underneath, the person I used to be, locked away and starving. What do you want? To be known. Really known. To have one conversation I don't have to repeat. One person who stays. He looked at her. What would you be doing if you weren't here? Cleaning up after people who don't see me. Trying to take up as little space as possible. Slowly ceasing to exist. Ella felt the weight of the truth. This, being here, being seen, dancing with you, it's not real. It's borrowed. At midnight, it ends. Why midnight? Because that's when the magic runs out. When the debt is paid. When I have to choose whether to go back to being invisible or stay in the dream forever. Sebastian stopped dancing. They were in the middle of the floor, other couples moving around them like a river around a rock. You're serious? Yes. You're talking about actual magic? Yes. He studied her face. And she watched him try to process it, try to fit it into a framework that made sense. Show me, he said finally. Ella looked down at her feet, at the glass slippers that held her identity. If I break one of these, you'll forget me. Everyone here will forget me. I'll cease to exist in any meaningful way. I wouldn't let that happen. You wouldn't have a choice. You don't even remember women you dance with for hours. You'd forget me mid-sentence. Then don't break them. Sebastian said, and his voice was urgent now. Whatever happens at midnight, whatever choice you have to make, choose to stay. Choose to be remembered. It's not that simple, isn't it? You said you wanted to be seen, to be remembered. I'm seeing you. I'm remembering you. Right now, in this moment, you're the most real thing in this room. Ella felt something crack in her chest. Want. Hope. The terrible possibility that this could be real. You don't understand what you're asking. Then explain it to me. Around them, the music had changed. Something slower, sadder. The other dancers were blurring at the edges, becoming less distinct. Ella felt a shift in the air, a warning. Time was moving differently here, faster and slower at once. The woman who gave me this dress, these shoes, she's not a fairy godmother from a children's story. She's something older, a keeper of balance. She said, "The world owes me visibility because I've been erased so completely. But magic has a price." What price? For her time, memory, life. Every spell she casts shortens her existence. She's ancient, Sebastian. She's lived forever by using other people's debts to pay her own way. And for me, I have to choose. Go back to being invisible, to fading day by day, or stay here, in this palace that only exists between dusk and midnight, and become part of it. A permanent fixture, trapped in this one moment forever. Sebastian was silent, processing. Then, what if there's a third option? There isn't. What if you leave before midnight, keep the slippers, and we figure out how to break whatever curse is making you invisible? Ella wanted to laugh or cry. It's not a curse someone casts, it's just life, class, circumstance. My stepmother, my stepsisters, they're not villains with dark magic. They're just people who found it convenient to forget I existed, and the world agreed with them. That's not life. That's violence, maybe. But it's the kind of violence that's legal, acceptable, normal. Nothing about this is normal, Sebastian said, and he pulled her closer. And they were dancing again, but it felt different now. Urgent. You said the woman. Grandmother. She maintains balance. She pays debts. What if we owe her something back? What if we can negotiate? You can't negotiate with that kind of power. Everyone can be negotiated with. That's what I do. I broker deals between impossible parties. I find middle ground where there shouldn't be any. His eyes were bright now, alive in a way they hadn't been before. What if the real debt isn't yours? What if the world owes you more than one night? Ella felt something shift, a possibility she hadn't considered. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we find grandmother before midnight. I'm suggesting we ask for a different payment plan. He smiled, and it was reckless and beautiful. I'm suggesting we cheat. You can't cheat magic. Watch me. The music swelled. The room brightened and dimmed at once. Ella felt the glass slippers against her feet, felt the dress that made her impossible to ignore, felt Sebastian's hand in hers. Solid, real. choosing to hold on. "It's already past 11, she said, checking the clock that hung in the center of the ballroom. Its hands moved too fast, ticking toward midnight with mechanical inevitability. "Then we need to move quickly. I don't even know how to find her. She just appeared. Then we make her appear." Sebastian pulled Ella off the dance floor, moving with sudden purpose. Where would someone like that be? Someone who maintains balance, who keeps accounts? Ella thought. The palace existed outside normal time, in the space between what was and what might be. If grandmother maintained equilibrium, she'd be somewhere central, somewhere that held the structure together. "The center," she said. "The place where everything balances." They moved through the palace, past ballrooms and corridors that seemed to shift and change when they weren't looking directly at them. Other guests drifted past, their faces blurred, their conversations muffled. The deeper they went, the less substantial the world became. Finally, they found a door that Ella was certain hadn't been there a moment before. It was plain wood, unmarked, but it hummed with presence. Sebastian tried the handle. It opened. Part 4. The Keeper of Balance. The room beyond was impossible. It was small, a closet, maybe, and vast, a cathedral, at the same time. The walls were lined with shelves that stretched into infinity. And on those shelves were objects that made no sense: a child's shoe, a wedding ring, a photograph of no one, a key to a house that had burned down, a letter never sent. Each object pulsed with significance, with story, with debt unpaid. Grandmother sat at a desk in the center of it all, writing in a ledger with a pen that looked like it was made from starlight or bone. "Ella," she said without looking up, "you brought a guest?" "I brought the prince," Ella said. "Sebastian," he corrected. "Not a prince. Just a man who's very tired of forgetting people." Grandmother looked up then, and her eyes were ancient and amused. "Ah, you're the one who can't hold on to faces. Yes, I know your story. Your family paid a very high price for their power, and you're still making installments." Sebastian stepped forward. "What do you mean?" "Your great-grandfather made a deal. Wealth, influence, social position. In exchange, his descendants would be isolated, would have everything except human connection. You remember conversations because information is allowed. But people, actual people, with faces and names and the messiness of being known, those slip away. The deal keeps you functional but fundamentally alone. I never agreed to that. Your great-grandfather did. You're just living with the terms." Grandmother turned her attention to Ella. "And you brought him here why? To negotiate, to ask for mercy. I told you the rules, child. Magic has a price. I've already paid mine by giving you this night. What if we pay more?" Sebastian said. Grandmother laughed, and it was not a kind sound. "With what?" You have money, power, influence, all worthless here. I trade in time, in memory, in possibility. What could you possibly offer? My curse, Sebastian said immediately. Break Ella's invisibility permanently. Make it so she can't be forgotten, can't be erased. In exchange, I'll take on more forgetting. Make me lose faces faster. Make me lose names immediately. Make my isolation complete. No, Ella said, horrified. That's not. It's fair, Sebastian interrupted. Looking at grandmother. You maintain balance. This is balance. She gains visibility. I increase my isolation. The scales tip, but they don't break. Grandmother studied him. Why would you do this? Because I've met hundreds of people I can't remember. Because I'm so lonely I've forgotten what connection feels like. Because she's the first person I've seen clearly in years. And I'd rather remember one person and lose everyone else than continue forgetting everything. That's not rational, Ball. Love isn't rational. The word hung in the air that had belled had been rung. Ella stared at Sebastian. They'd known each other for less than 2 hours. This wasn't love. It was recognition, kinship. Two people who understood each other's particular kind of erasure. But maybe that was enough. Grandmother tapped her pen against the ledger. The deal is interesting. Self-sacrifice always is, but it's incomplete. Ella, what do you offer? Ella looked at the shelves stretching into infinity. At all the debts and losses and broken things that accumulated when people lived their lives. She thought about her mother's herb garden, about the person she'd been before. The house swallowed her, about the future she'd been promised and then quietly denied. I offer my choice, she said finally. The one you promised me. Stay or go, magic or mortality. I give that up. Let someone else decide. That's not a payment, grandmother said. That's a surrender. Isn't that worth more? You're trying to maintain balance in a world that's fundamentally unfair. Every spell you cast is trying to level scales that are designed to tip. I'm offering you the thing everyone wants most: agency, the right to choose. Let it go to someone who needs it more. Grandmother was quiet for a long moment. Outside the impossible room, Ella could hear bells beginning to ring. Distant, getting closer, midnight approaching. You're both fools, grandmother said finally. You're offering to trade your suffering for each other's. That's not balance. That's just redistributing pain. Then what do you want? Ella asked. What would actually balance the scales? Grandmother stood. She was taller than Ella remembered. Or maybe the room had gotten smaller. You're asking the wrong question. The scales don't balance. They never have. I don't maintain equilibrium. I witness it failing, over and over, and I try to give people small reprieves. Moments of visibility. Nights of connection. Temporary escapes from the grinding machinery of class and power and forgetting. She walked to one of the shelves and picked up an object, a glass slipper, identical to the ones Ella wore. There have been others, Grandmother said softly. Girls who were invisible, boys who couldn't be remembered, people who the world decided didn't matter. I gave them each one night. And at the end, they all made the same choice. They ran. They took their moment of being seen, and they left before midnight, before they had to stay forever. What happened to them? Ella asked. They went back to being invisible, slowly, some faster than others. A few found ways to hold onto small pieces of visibility. Communities that remembered them. Work that made them necessary. Lovers who chose to see them. But most faded. Grandmother turned the glass slipper in her hands. And each one left this behind. A vessel of identity. A proof they existed. You collect them, Sebastian said. The evidence of all the people who chose freedom over being trapped. I witnessed them, Grandmother corrected. I remember them, because someone has to. The bells were louder now. Ella could feel them in her chest, in her bones. The palace was beginning to close. Time was running out. I can't break the invisibility, Grandmother said, looking at Ella. It's not a spell I cast. It's a condition of your life. Your stepmother's casual cruelty. Your stepsister's convenient blindness. The world's agreement that girls, like you, don't matter. I can give you visibility for a night, but I can't make the world see you. Then what can you do? Ella asked, and she was surprised by how calm her voice was. How certain. I can give you proof, Grandmother said. I can make it so that anyone who sees you tonight can never completely forget. They won't remember your name. They won't remember your face. But they'll remember the feeling of having seen you, of having been seen by you. It's not much, but it's something. And Sebastian? Ella asked. Grandmother looked at the prince. This man who'd offered to increase his own isolation to save someone he'd just met. I can help differently. Your curse is inherited debt, which means it can be renegotiated. I can't break it, but I can shift the terms. How? Right now you forget faces. I can make it so you remember one face clearly, perfectly, for as long as you need to. But only one. Every other person will blur faster, disappear quicker. You'll lose names immediately. Voices will fade. You'll be more isolated than ever, except for one person who stays sharp. Sebastian looked at Ella. That's not a hard choice. It should be, Grandmother said sharply. You're young. You'll live decades. You're choosing to remember one person clearly while losing everyone else. Your family will blur. Your friends will fade. You'll be functionally alone, except for this one connection. I'm already alone, Sebastian said quietly. At least this way, I'll remember why. The bells were impossibly loud now. The room was shaking. Ella felt the glass slippers growing warm against her feet, felt the dress beginning to lose its solidity. "You have to choose," grandmother said, looking at Ella. "Run now. Keep the slippers as proof. Go back to your half-life and try to make something of it. Or stay. Become part of the palace. Exist forever in this one perfect moment." Ella looked at Sebastian, at this man who'd offered to trade his curse for hers. Who'd decided in the space of 2 hours that she was worth remembering? She thought about the house that had swallowed her, about the years of fading, about the exhaustion of trying to exist when the world kept insisting she didn't. And she thought about her mother, about the herb garden, about the woman who'd believed in small beautifications, little resistances against the gray sprawl of the city. "I choose something else," Ella said. Grandmother raised an eyebrow. "There is no something else. There's always something else. You said it yourself. You don't maintain balance. You witness it failing. You give people reprieves. But what if we don't need a reprieve? What if we need a revolution? Explain. Break both our curses incompletely. Give me enough visibility that I can build on it. Give Sebastian the ability to remember me clearly. But let the rest of his curse soften over time. Don't fix everything. Just make it possible for us to fix it ourselves." "That's not how magic works," grandmother said. "I can't give you potential. I can only give you moments. Then give us the tools to make our own moments." Ella felt the slippers against her feet, felt them warming, cracking, beginning to break. You collect evidence of people who existed. Give us the ability to create our own evidence. Grandmother looked between them. The room was shaking harder now. Objects were falling from shelves. The bells were deafening. "This is chaos," grandmother said, but she was smiling. "You're asking me to create uncertainty, to refuse the binary choice, to let you exist in ambiguity." "Yes," Ella said. "That will cost more than a night, more than memory. It will cost me years of existence. Decades, possibly. I'll have to pour so much magic into this that I'll age rapidly. I might not survive it." "Then don't do it," Sebastian said quickly. "We'll find another way." But grandmother was already moving. She crossed to Ella in 3 steps and placed her hands on the glass slippers. They blazed with light, painful, beautiful, impossible. "I'm old," grandmother said. "I'm so old that I've forgotten what it's like to believe things can change. You're reminding me. That's worth the cost." The light spread from the slippers up through Ella's body. It felt like being born, like being recognized, like every cell in her body was being rewritten with the fundamental truth: I exist. I matter. I am here. The glass slippers cracked, but they didn't shatter. They fractured into patterns, like frost on a window, still holding together, still functional, but visibly broken. Grandmother turned to Sebastian. She touched his forehead with one finger, and he gasped. "You'll remember her," Grandmother said. "Not just her face, her voice, her presence, the way she thinks, the way she exists. And over time, if you work at it, you'll be able to hold on to others too. Not perfectly, not easily, but possible." The room was dissolving. The walls were becoming translucent. Through them, Ella could see the ballroom, the other guests, the clock striking midnight. "Run," Grandmother said, and she was fading now, becoming transparent. "Get out of the palace. Don't stay. Don't become permanent. Go out into the world and make your own magic." Ella grabbed Sebastian's hand. They ran. Through the impossible room, down corridors that were collapsing behind them, past ballrooms that were folding in on themselves. The other guests were frozen, trapped in the moment of midnight, becoming part of the palace's permanent collection. Ella's glass slippers cracked further with each step, but they held. Sebastian pulled her forward, his grip tight and certain. They burst through the front doors just as the final bell rang. Behind them, the palace shimmered and disappeared. One moment it was there, solid, real, impossible. The next, it was gone, leaving only an ordinary building, dark and locked, with no sign anyone had ever been inside. Ella and Sebastian stood on the empty street, breathing hard. The dress was still there, but fading now, becoming something more ordinary. A nice dress, expensive but not impossible. The glass slippers were cracked but whole, still glowing faintly in the streetlight. "Did that actually happen?" Sebastian asked. "I think so. I remember you," he said wonderingly. "I remember everything about tonight. Your face, your voice, the way you argued with Grandmother. I've never remembered this clearly before." Ella looked down at her hands. They were solid, present, real, not fading at the edges, not disappearing. "I think it worked," she said softly. A car pulled up, the same black car that had brought her. The driver got out, opened the door. "I should go home," Ella said, but the words felt strange. Home, the house that had swallowed her, the step-family that had erased her. Could she go back there now? Would it be different? "Come with me instead," Sebastian said. "Not to my place. Just somewhere we can talk. Somewhere we can figure out what happens next." "What does happen next?" "I have no idea. But I want to figure it out together." Ella thought about Grandmother, about the years of existence the old woman had spent to give them this chance, about the scales that don't balance and the small rebellions that might, eventually, tip them. "Okay," she said. "Let's figure it out together." They got in the car. As it pulled away from the ordinary building that had briefly been a palace, Ella looked back. For just a moment, she saw a figure in the shadows. Grandmother, older now, more transparent, but smiling. Then, the The car turned a corner, and the moment was gone. Part 5. The morning after magic. The diner was the kind of place that existed outside normal time. 24 hours. Fluorescent bright. Full of people who were either very early or very late to wherever they were supposed to be. Sebastian led Ella to a booth in the back, and they sat across from each other, still wearing impossible clothes, trying to process what had happened. A waitress approached, looked directly at Ella and smiled. "Coffee." "Yes," Ella said, and the word felt like a victory. The waitress had seen her, made eye contact, acknowledged her existence. "Same," Sebastian said. When the waitress left, they sat in silence for a moment. Then Sebastian laughed. A real laugh, full of surprise and relief, and something like joy. "What?" Ella asked. "I remember you. I'm sitting here, looking at you, and I remember everything. Your name, your face. The fact that you argued with an ancient magical being about the terms of a curse. This is..." He shook his head. "I've never had this before." "What about before your curse? When you were a kid?" "The curse has always been there. It's hereditary. I have childhood memories, but even the people in them are blurred. My parents are impressions, kindness and distance, expectations and disappointment, but no faces, no names that stick." The waitress returned with coffee. Ella wrapped her hands around the mug, feeling its warmth, its realness. "What was your family like?" Sebastian asked. "Before." Ella thought about her mother, about the herb garden, about a small apartment that had felt like a whole world. Small, safe. "My mother taught literature at a community college. She loved old stories, fairy tales, myths, folklore. She used to say that stories were how we figured out how to live." "What would she say about tonight?" "She'd probably say that the best stories don't end. They just pause, and we have to write the next part ourselves." Sebastian nodded slowly. "So what do we write?" "I have to go back," Ella said. "To the house, to my stepfamily. I need to see if anything's changed." "Do you think it will have?" "I don't know. Grandmother said she couldn't break the invisibility. It's not a spell, it's a condition. But she gave me enough visibility to build on. Maybe that's enough. Maybe if I can be seen by strangers, I can make my stepfamily see me too. And if they can't, if they still refuse to acknowledge you." Ella looked at her glass slippers, cracked but whole. "Then I leave. I find somewhere else to live. I build a life where I matter. That's terrifying. Yes. But so is staying invisible." They drank their coffee in comfortable silence. Around them, the diner hummed with the ambient noise of people existing. Conversations, clinking dishes, the hiss of the coffee machine. Ordinary sounds that felt newly precious. "I need to tell you something," Sebastian said finally. "About my family. About the curse." "Okay." Grandmother said my great Grandfather made a deal: wealth and power in exchange for isolation. But I don't think that's the whole story. He turned his coffee mug in his hands. I think he was lonely. I think he wanted so badly to matter, to be important, that he was willing to trade human connection for social position. And his descendants have been living with that choice ever since. That's not your fault. No. But it's my responsibility. The curse can't be fully broken. Grandmother made that clear. But it can be renegotiated. She softened it, made it possible for me to remember you. Maybe over time. With work, I can push back against it more. Remember other people. Build connections that last. Or maybe you can't, Ella said gently. Maybe the curse is too strong. Maybe you'll only ever clearly remember me. Would that be enough? I don't know. Is it enough for you? Sebastian was quiet for a long time. My whole life, I've been surrounded by people I can't hold on to. Family who blur. Friends who fade. Relationships that end because I can't remember faces, can't build continuity. And I've been so lonely that I've almost convinced myself it's normal, that everyone feels this disconnected. But they don't. No, they don't. And meeting you, remembering you, it's shown me what I've been missing. But it's also shown me what I'll keep missing if the curse doesn't soften more. So what do you want to do? I want to try, Sebastian said. I want to push against the curse. I want to see if grandmother was right, if it can soften over time with work. I want to remember more than just you, even though it might not work. Even though it might not work. Ella thought about grandmother's words. I can give you the tools to make your own moments. Not certainty. Not guarantee. Just possibility. Okay, she said. We'll both try. I'll try to build a life where I'm visible. You'll try to remember people. And we'll, what? Date. Support each other. Figure it out as we go. All of that, Sebastian said. If you're willing. I'm willing. But I need to go home first. I need to face my stepfamily. I need to know if things have changed. Do you want me to come with you? No? This is something I need to do alone. They finished their coffee. The sky outside was starting to lighten. The gray, blue of early dawn. The impossible night was ending, transitioning into an ordinary day. Sebastian paid the bill. They stood outside the diner, and for a moment, they just looked at each other. I'll remember this, Sebastian said. You standing here. The way the light is hitting your face. Everything? Good, Ella said. Remember it. And if you start to forget, call me. I'll remind you. How will you remind me if I've forgotten your phone number? Ella pulled out her phone, still in the small purse she'd somehow had all night, and they exchanged numbers. The mundane practicality of it felt surreal after everything else. There, she said. No, you have no excuse. Sebastian smiled, and it was genuine and warm and entirely his own. Thank you for tonight, for arguing with grandmother, for being stubbornly visible. Thank you for seeing me. He leaned in and kissed her, gentle and brief, and Ella felt it like an anchor. Proof that she was real, that this had happened, that she existed in a way someone else could touch. Then the black car pulled up, and Ella got in, and Sebastian watched as she drove away into the morning. Part 6. Returning to the house of forgetting. The house looked exactly the same. Early morning sunlight made it look almost pleasant. The carefully maintained exterior, the expensive cars in the driveway, the manicured lawn that someone else was paid to maintain. Ella stood on the sidewalk, still wearing her fading dress and cracked glass slippers, and felt the weight of what she was about to do. The front door was unlocked. She stepped inside. The house was quiet. Her step-family wasn't back yet. They'd probably stayed late at the ball, networking, making connections, doing all the things people did when they believed their presence mattered. Ella walked through the familiar rooms, seeing them differently now. The expensive furniture, the carefully curated art, the surfaces that she cleaned daily, but was never allowed to truly touch. It all looked smaller somehow, less important. She went to her room, the small space under the stairs, and changed out of the dress. It had fully faded now, becoming something ordinary. She folded it carefully, placed it in her closet. The glass slippers she kept on. They were cracked but still whole, still glowing faintly. Then she waited. Victoria and her daughters returned around 8 in the morning. Ella heard them before she saw them. Margot's high, pitched complaining, Lydia's measured responses, Victoria's crisp directions. Ella stepped into the hallway. Victoria saw her first, and for the first time in months, maybe years, she really saw her. Her eyes focused. Her expression shifted from automatic dismissal to actual recognition. "Ella," she said, and the word sounded strange in her mouth, like she was remembering a language she used to speak. "Where were you last night?" "Out," Ella said. Her voice was steady, clear. "Oh, where?" "At the ball." Lydia and Margot stared at her. They were seeing her too, really seeing her. Their faces showed confusion, irritation, and something else. Something that might have been fear. "That's impossible," Margot said. "We would have seen you." "You did see me," Ella said. "You just didn't recognize me." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "What are you playing at?" "I'm not playing at anything. I went to the ball. I danced with the prince. I came home, and now I'm leaving." The words surprised Ella even as she said them, but they felt right, true. She'd come back to see if things had changed, and they had. She could be seen now. But being seen wasn't the same as being valued, and she didn't need her step-family's value anymore. Leaving, Victoria's voice was sharp. You can't leave. You live here. You have responsibilities. No, Ella said. I have labor I perform for free. That's different. We've given you a home, food, security. You've given me the space under the stairs and the leftovers from your meals. That's not generosity. That's exploitation dressed up as kindness. Lydia stepped forward. You can't just leave. Legally, you're entitled to nothing. Father left everything to Mother? I know. I don't want anything from you. Ella looked at the house, at the place that had swallowed her, had made her invisible, had slowly erased her existence. I just wanted you to see me one last time, to know that I was here, that I mattered. This is ridiculous, Margaret said. Where will you even go? You have no money, no skills, no one who'll remember you long enough to hire you. Well, see, Ella said. She walked to her room, packed the few things that mattered. Some clothes, her mother's photographs, the journal she'd kept to prove she existed. She put on regular shoes, but she tucked the cracked glass slippers into her bag. Evidence. Proof. When she came back into the hallway, her stepfamily was still there, watching her with a mixture of confusion and alarm. If you leave, Victoria said, don't expect to come back. Don't expect help. I don't, Ella said. I don't expect anything from you. She walked to the front door. Her hand was on the knob when Victoria spoke again. Why did he dance with you? Ella turned. Oh, the prince. Everyone's talking about it. He danced with some girl for hours, ignored everyone else, left with her before midnight. Victoria's voice was sharp. Was that you? Yes. Why you? What could you possibly have that was worth his attention? Ella thought about Sebastian, about the way he'd seen her, about recognition and loneliness and the particular curse of being forgotten. Understanding, she said finally. We understood each other. Then she opened the door and left. Outside, the morning was bright and cold. Ella stood on the sidewalk with her bag and her cracked glass slippers and no clear plan for what came next. She pulled out her phone. Sebastian's number was there. She could call him. He'd said he remembered her. Probably he meant it, but she didn't call. Not yet. She needed to do this part herself. To prove that she could exist independently, that her visibility didn't depend on his attention. Instead, she started walking through the expensive neighborhood where her stepfamily lived, past the shops and restaurants she'd never been welcome in, toward the older part of the city where her mother had taught and where Ella had grown up. Her mother's old apartment building was still there, shabby but maintained. Ella stood outside it for a long moment, remembering. Then she went inside and knocked on the superintendent's door. An old man answered. He looked at her, really looked at her and smiled. Can I help you? I'm looking for an apartment, Ella said. Something small, affordable. Do you have anything available? Might do. Come in. Let's talk. And just like that, with an old man who saw her and a conversation that didn't disappear, Ella began building the next part of her story. Part 7. Learning to be seen. The apartment was tiny. A studio with a kitchenette and a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. But it had a window that faced east, and in the mornings, sunlight would pour through and make the whole space glow. Ella signed the lease with money from her mother's insurance account, the one her stepfamily had never known about. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start. She spent the first week just existing in the space, unpacking her few belongings, buying necessities, sheets, dishes, food. Learning to take up space without apologizing for it. The cracked glass slippers sat on her windowsill, catching light. Sebastian called on the third day. His voice on the phone was warm, familiar, certain. "I remember you," he said, and she could hear the relief in it. "I was worried I'd wake up and you'd have faded, but you haven't. You're still clear. How are the others?" Ella asked. "The people around you." A pause, blurring faster. "I had breakfast with my father this morning, and I couldn't make out his face. But I remembered having breakfast with him before. The routine of it. Just not him." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It's the curse. It's what it does. But I'm working on it. Trying to push back. Grandmother said it could soften over time." "Has it?" "Too early to tell. But I'm documenting everything. Writing down names and faces and details. Building external memory to support what my brain can't hold." Ella understood. She'd done the same thing when she was disappearing. Journaling, making lists, creating proof of her existence. "When can I see you?" Sebastian asked. "Soon. I'm still setting up my life. Getting used to being visible again." "What does that mean?" "It means I went to a coffee shop yesterday, and the barista remembered my order from the day before. It means I'm having conversations with strangers that don't evaporate. It means I'm building a presence. That's good. That's really good." They talked for an hour. About nothing important. Just the texture of their days, the small victories and frustrations. At the end, Sebastian said, "I'm going to keep calling. Every day. Until you're ready to see me." "Okay," Ella said. "I'd like that." He did call. Every day. And slowly, Ella started to believe that he wouldn't forget. In the second week, Ella started looking for work. She had no resume. Her years with her stepfamily had been unpaid labor, invisible and uncredited. But she had skills, organization, management, the ability to maintain systems. She applied to libraries, bookstores, community centers, places where her mother had believed in, places that valued care and attention over credentials. A small independent bookstore called her for an interview. The owner was a woman in her 60s, with reading glasses on a chain and ink-stained fingers. "Tell me why you want to work here," she said. Ella thought about truth, about the fact that she could be seen now, could be remembered, and that meant she could be honest. "I need to rebuild my life," she said. "I spent years being invisible, working without acknowledgement, existing without being recognized, and I'm learning how to be seen again. I think working here, with books and stories, and people who care about both, might help." The woman studied her. "That's an unusual answer. I've had an unusual life. You're hired. Part-time to start. We'll see how it goes." Ella felt something unlock in her chest. A job, income, independence. Proof that she could exist in the world on her own terms. The work was simple but satisfying. Shelving books, helping customers, managing inventory. But more than that, it was being seen. Regular customers learned her name. Colleagues included her in conversations. Her presence mattered. In the third week, Sebastian asked if he could visit. They met at a park, neutral ground, public, safe. Ella saw him before he saw her, and for a moment she just watched. He looked tired, strained, like someone holding on to something very tightly. Then he looked up, and his face changed. Relief, recognition, joy. "You're here," he said. "I'm here." They sat on a bench. It was a cold afternoon, early winter, and the park was mostly empty, except for a few hardy joggers and a woman walking a small dog. "How are you?" Ella asked. "Lonely," Sebastian said honestly. "The curse is getting worse, I think. Or maybe I'm just noticing it more now that I know what it's like to remember someone. My family is frustrated with me. I keep having conversations I don't remember having, making plans I forget. They think I'm being deliberately difficult." "Are you telling them about the curse?" "How can I? It sounds insane. I'm cursed by my great-grandfather's deal for wealth, and now I can't remember faces. They'd think I was having a breakdown." "Maybe you should let them think that. At least then they'd have an explanation." Sebastian laughed bitterly. "Maybe." "How are you?" "Really, better," Ella said. "Scared sometimes. I wake up and check the mirror to make sure I can still see myself. But I have a job, an apartment, friends starting to form. I'm building something real. Friends, colleagues, mostly. The woman who owns the bookstore invites me to lunch sometimes. There's a regular customer who always asks for recommendations. Small connections. But they're real. They're not forgetting me. That's good. That's really good." Sebastian reached for her hand. "Can I still be part of this? Your new life. You are part of it. But I need it to be my life, not just an extension of your visibility. Do you understand?" "I think so. You don't want to trade being invisible in your stepfamily's house for being visible only because you're with me." "Exactly." They sat in silence for a while, hands linked, watching the park exist around them. Grandmother was right, Sebastian said eventually. The scales don't balance. We're not going to have a fairy tale ending where everything is perfect. But maybe we can have something real instead. What does real look like? I don't know. I'm making it up as I go. He looked at her. But I'd like to make it up with you. If you'll let me. Ella thought about her mother. About stories that pause and wait for you to write the next part. About the choice to stay or go, to be trapped in a perfect moment or risk the messy reality of building something new. Okay, she said. Let's make it up together. Part 8. The architecture of memory. Winter settled over the city like a question no one knew how to answer. Ella worked at the bookstore 6 days a week, built relationships with regulars, slowly accumulated enough money to feel stable. Sebastian called every day without fail, and his voice remained clear, certain, distinctly his. But he was struggling. He'd started keeping a detailed journal. Photographs, names, descriptions, conversations. He took pictures of everyone he met, wrote down identifying features, tried to build external memory to compensate for what his brain refused to hold. It helped, but only partially. His family had started noticing his deterioration. His father suggested therapy. His mother worried about early onset Alzheimer's. His siblings made jokes that weren't quite jokes about his increasing distance. I had dinner with my younger sister last night, Sebastian told Ella during one of their calls, and I couldn't remember her name. My own sister. I knew the relationship. Sister, younger, works in architecture. But her name was just gone. I had to ask her. She looked at me like I'd slapped her. What did you tell her? The truth. That I couldn't remember. That something was wrong with me. She cried. Ella held the phone tighter. I'm sorry. It's getting worse. Grandmother said the curse could soften. But I think it's getting worse because I'm remembering you so clearly. Like there's only so much memory available, and you're taking up all the space. Is that true? I don't know. Magic doesn't come with an instruction manual. They met in person once a week, sometimes twice, always in public spaces, parks, cafes, the bookstore where Ella worked. Sebastian would arrive, and she could see the relief on his face when he saw her. The way his whole body relaxed at the confirmation that she was still there, still clear, still remembered. But she also saw the exhaustion, the strain of trying to remember everyone else while his brain kept insisting that only Ella mattered. One evening, 4 months after the ball, Sebastian showed up at the bookstore near closing time. Ella was cataloging new arrivals, and she looked up to see him standing in the doorway, looking lost. Sebastian, I need help, he said quietly. She locked the door, turned the sign to closed. and led him to the back room where employees took breaks. They sat on the worn couch, and Sebastian put his head in his hands. "I can't do this anymore," he said. "The curse isn't softening. It's getting worse. I can remember you perfectly, too perfectly. I could describe every expression you've ever made, every tone of voice, every gesture. But everyone else is completely gone. My family are strangers. My colleagues are impressions. I'm so isolated that I'm starting to understand why my great-grandfather made the deal in the first place." "What do you mean?" "He was lonely. Probably like this. And he thought wealth and power would fix it. That if he was important enough, influential enough, it wouldn't matter if he couldn't connect with people. He was wrong, obviously. But I understand the impulse." Ella thought about her own invisibility, about the years of fading, about how easy it would be to make any deal that promised visibility, even if the cost was terrible. "We need to find grandmother," she said. Sebastian looked up. "What?" "We need to renegotiate again. The deal isn't working. You're getting worse, not better. Maybe she can adjust it." "How do we find her?" "She only appears when debts need to be paid." Ella stood, pacing the small break room. "Then we create a debt. We do something that requires her attention. We force the scales to tip." "Like what?" Ella thought. About magic and debt, and the way grandmother had described her role. "I don't create happy endings. I maintain balance. I witness failure and give reprieves." "We break the glass slippers," Ella said suddenly. Sebastian stared at her. "What?" "Grandmother said if they break, I'll be erased from memory. Everyone who saw me will forget. But what if that creates a debt? What if my erasure tips the scales so far that she has to appear to rebalance them?" "That's insane. You'd lose everything. I'd forget you." "Maybe. Or maybe the magic has changed. I'm not invisible anymore. Not completely. I have a job, connections, proof of existence. Breaking the slippers might not erase me. It might just free me from their terms. Or it might erase you completely, and I'll never remember we had this conversation. Then you'll have your journal," Ella said. "You document everything. You'll have proof we met. Proof I existed." Sebastian pulled out his phone, opened his journal app, pages and pages of entries about Ella. Photographs, conversations, evidence. "This is a terrible plan," he said. "Do you have a better one?" He didn't. They both knew it. Ella went home that night with Sebastian following. Her apartment was still small, still spare. But it was hers. The glass slippers sat on the windowsill, where they'd been since she moved in. Catching streetlight now instead of sun. She picked them up. They were lighter than she remembered. More fragile. "Are you sure?" Sebastian asked. "No. But I'm going to do it anyway." She thought about her mother. About stories that require you to write the next part. about the choice between safety and freedom, between being preserved in glass and being human and breakable. She dropped the first slipper. It hit the hardwood floor and shattered. Not dramatically. No explosion of light. No magical backlash. Just the sound of breaking glass, sharp and final. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Sebastian gasped. "Ella!" She turned. He was staring at her with confusion. "Who are you? Why am I in your apartment?" The erasure was immediate. Total. She opened her mouth to explain, but she could see it in his eyes. He didn't know her. She'd been completely removed from his memory. Panic seized her chest. She'd made a terrible mistake. She'd traded visibility for nothing. But then Sebastian was pulling out his phone, frantically scrolling through his journal. Wait. I have entries about you. Hundreds of them. Your name is Ella. We met at a ball. He looked up, looked at her face, and she watched him try to match the person in front of him to the person in his records. I don't remember you, but I know you mattered. I know I chose to remember you. Sebastian. Her voice was shaking. Look at me. Really look. He did. And slowly, painfully, she saw something change in his expression. Not memory, not recognition, but choice. He was choosing to see her, even though the magic said he shouldn't. I know you, he said slowly. I don't remember you, but I know you. Then the air shimmered. Grandmother appeared in the center of the apartment, looking older than before. More transparent. But that, she said, was either very brave or very stupid. Both, Ella said. Her hands were shaking. The curse you gave Sebastian, it's not softening. It's getting worse. He can only remember me, and now even that's breaking. This isn't balance. This isn't equilibrium. This is just trading one kind of suffering for another. Grandmother moved to the broken glass on the floor. She knelt, touched the shards, and they blazed with faint light. You broke the binding charm. By rights, you should have been erased completely. Everyone who remembered you should have forgotten. But they didn't, Ella said. Sebastian has his journal. My coworkers still know me. I'm not invisible. No, you're not. Grandmother stood looking between them. The magic has changed. You changed it. By building your own evidence. By creating connections that exist outside the spell. You made yourself impossible to fully erase. So the slippers don't work anymore. The slippers were always a crutch. A temporary measure. You don't need them anymore. You've built your own visibility. Grandmother turned to Sebastian. And you. You're choosing to see her even though your curse says you can't. That's not magic. That's will. I don't understand, Sebastian said. Your great-grandfather's curse was that you'd forget people. But it didn't say you couldn't choose to remember. It didn't account for effort, for documentation, for the stubborn human insistence on connection despite impossible odds. So I can remember her. If you work at it, if you choose to every day deliberately, it won't be easy. Your brain will fight you. But the curse doesn't override free will. It just makes free will much, much harder. Sebastian looked at Ella, at this woman he didn't remember but knew mattered. I'll work at it, every day, as long as it takes. Grandmother smiled, and it was tired but genuine. Then the scales have balanced themselves. You've both learned the lesson? What lesson? Ella asked. That being seen isn't something given to you. It's something you build. That memory isn't passive. It's an act of will. That love isn't magic. It's choice. Repeat it over and over until it becomes truth. The light in the apartment was changing. Dawn was coming. Grandmother was fading again, becoming more transparent. Wait, Ella said. The curse on Sebastian's family. Can you break it now? Completely. No. I told you. Inherited debts can be renegotiated, but not erased. The curse will always be there, but it can be pushed against, resisted, softened through effort. And my invisibility was never a curse, was always circumstance. You've already broken it by refusing to accept it. Grandmother was almost gone now, just a shimmer in the air. You don't need me anymore. Either of you. You've learned to make your own magic. Then she was gone. Ella and Sebastian stood in the apartment, surrounded by broken glass and early morning light. He was looking at her with concentration, with effort, trying to burn her face into his memory through sheer force of will. I'm going to remember you, he said. Even if I have to relearn you every day. Even if I have to read my journal every morning to know who you are, I'll remember you. And if you can't, then I'll trust my past self. The person who wrote all those entries. The one who clearly knew you were worth remembering. Ella swept up the broken glass. The second slipper sat on the windowsill, still whole. She picked it up, felt its weight. Should I break this one too? She asked. I don't think it matters anymore, Sebastian said. You're not held by the magic anymore. You're held by your own presence. Ella placed the remaining slipper on her bookshelf. Evidence. Proof. But not a binding charm. Just a reminder of the night she stopped being invisible. Part 9. Building the next chapter. The next months were an education in the architecture of memory and visibility. Sebastian started therapy. Not for the curse. He couldn't explain that. But for memory techniques. How to build mnemonic devices. How to strengthen recall. How to compensate for neurological challenges. The therapist thought he had a rare condition. Sebastian let her think that. He created elaborate systems. Photographs of everyone important, labeled with names and relationships and key facts. Daily reviews of his journal. Routines that reinforced memory through repetition. And he worked hardest on remembering Ella. Every morning, he would wake up and read his journal entries about her. Look at photographs. Remind himself who she was, what they meant to each other. Some mornings, she was immediately clear. Other mornings, she was blurred, and he had to work to bring her into focus. But he always did the work. Ella, meanwhile, continued building her own visibility. The bookstore promoted her to assistant manager. She started attending community events. She made friends deliberately, actively, refusing to let herself fade into the background. Her stepfamily tried to contact her once. Victoria called, said they needed to talk about family matters and inheritance. Ella listened for 30 seconds, then hung up. She didn't owe them her attention. She did, however, visit her mother's grave for the first time in years. Brought flowers. Sat and talked to the headstone about everything that had happened. "You were right," she said to the carved name on stone. "The best stories don't end, they just pause. And I'm writing the next part. I'm writing it myself." Sebastian joined her halfway through the visit. He'd read in his journal that today was the anniversary of her mother's death, and he'd set a reminder to check on her. "Is that weird?" he asked. "That I need a calendar reminder to know what's important to you." "It's practical," Ella said. "It's you working with your curse instead of against it." They sat together in the cemetery, and Ella talked about her mother, about the herb garden, about believing in small beautifications. Sebastian took notes on his phone, not compulsively, but deliberately, building his external memory. "I'm remembering more people," he said after a while. "Not perfectly. But I can hold onto my sister's name now. I recognize my father's face about half the time. It's not much, but it's more than before." "That's good. That's really good." Grandmother was right. The curse doesn't override free will. It just makes it harder. But if I choose deliberately, if I work at it, I can push back. "Do you think your great-grandfather ever tried?" "I don't know. Maybe he did at first. Maybe he got tired. Maybe he decided isolation was easier than constantly fighting to connect." "That's sad." "It is. But I'm not him. I'm not going to make his mistakes." They left the cemetery together, stopped at a small cafe Ella liked. The barista remembered her order without asking, and Ella felt the small victory of that. Being remembered, being known, being present in someone else's routine. Sebastian ordered coffee and pulled out his journal, making notes about the visit, the conversation, the way Ella looked in afternoon light. "You know," Ella said, watching him write, "the old fairy tale. Cinderella marries the prince and lives happily ever after. Everything's perfect. This isn't a fairy tale. No, it's better. It's real." Sebastian looked up. "Is it? Are we real?" "I think so. We're choosing each other despite impossible odds. We're working to maintain something the world says shouldn't exist. That's as real as it gets. Even though I might forget you. Even though you might forget me. Because you'll read your journal. See your photographs. Remember that you chose me. And you'll choose me again. Every time, Sebastian said. I'll choose you every time. And he did. Day after day, week after week. When the memories were clear, he treasured them. When they were blurred, he worked to recover them. When they were gone, he trusted his documentation and chose to rebuild them. Ella did the same with her visibility. She stopped apologizing for taking up space. She spoke in meetings. She offered opinions. She existed boldly and deliberately, refusing to fade back into the shadows. 6 months after breaking the first glass slipper, they moved in together. Sebastian's family was baffled. He'd never maintained a relationship for more than a few weeks before. But Ella was there, solid and present, and even when he couldn't remember the details of how they met, he knew she mattered. They created systems together, routines that reinforced connection. Morning coffee, where they'd review the day ahead. Evening conversations, where they'd document what happened. Weekly date nights, where they'd create new memories deliberately. It wasn't perfect. Some days were harder than others. Sebastian would have bad days where everyone blurred, including Ella. And he'd panic. Ella would have days where she felt herself fading, where conversations seemed to slip away, where she worried the invisibility was returning. But they had each other. And they had the knowledge that visibility and memory weren't gifts bestowed by magic. They were things you built, deliberately and repeatedly, through choice and effort and stubborn refusal to disappear. Part 10. The anniversary 1 year after the ball, autumn returned to the city. The air turned cold and sharp, and people started talking about the autumn ball again. The mysterious event that appeared once a year. The place where impossible things were briefly possible. Ella wasn't sure it would appear. Maybe it had only existed that one time, created by grandmother's magic. Maybe it was gone now, closed, impossible to reach. But on the anniversary night, as she and Sebastian were finishing dinner in their apartment, they heard bells. Distant. Getting closer. The sound of something opening between one moment and the next. They looked at each other. Do you want to go? Sebastian asked. I don't know. Do you? I don't remember the first time, he admitted. I mean, I've read about it in my journal. I've seen the photographs. But the lived memory is gone. It would be like experiencing it for the first time. Would that be good or bad? I don't know. They stood by the window. In the distance, they could see it. The palace, appearing in the space between what was and what might be. Solid and impossible and calling. Let's go, Ella said. Not because we need to, but because we can. They dressed quickly. Ella wore a simple black dress, elegant but not magical. Sebastian wore a suit. They looked like normal people going to a normal event. The palace was exactly as Ella remembered it. Beautiful in a way that hurt. Full of people moving through rituals of connection. They entered together. The crowd parted, but not because of magic, just because they were moving with purpose, with certainty, with the confidence of people who knew they belonged. The ballroom was impossible. Too large, too beautiful, too much. And in the center, couples were dancing. "Do you want to dance?" Sebastian asked. "Yes." They moved onto the floor. Sebastian's steps were precise and mechanical. He'd had to relearn how to waltz after forgetting. Ella followed his lead, and they moved through the other couples like water through stone. "I wish I remembered the first time," Sebastian said. "I wish I could compare this to that night." Maybe it's better that you don't. Maybe every time can be the first time. That's both beautiful and heartbreaking. Most true things are. They danced through several songs. Around them, other couples moved and talked and performed their own rituals of connection. Ella saw her stepsisters across the room. They looked older now, or maybe just tired. They didn't recognize her. That was fine. She didn't need them to. Near midnight, they stopped dancing and went looking for the impossible room. The place where grandmother kept her ledgers and her evidence. They found the door. It opened. The room was the same, vast and small at once, shelves stretching into infinity. But grandmother wasn't there. Instead, there were two objects on the desky, a new ledger and a letter. Sebastian picked up the letter. "Read it aloud." "Ella and Sebastian, I told you the scales don't balance. I told you I witness failure and give reprieves. But I was wrong. Or you proved me wrong. You've built something that doesn't need my magic to sustain it. You've created your own equilibrium. This ledger is yours now. Use it to document your choices. Use it to remind yourselves why you keep choosing each other. Use it as evidence that love isn't magic. It's work, repeated daily until it becomes truth. I'm very old now. Too old. The magic I gave you cost me more time than I expected. But it was worth it. You reminded me that sometimes the scales do balance. Not because of magic, because of will. Keep choosing each other. Keep building your own visibility. Keep remembering and being remembered. Da live well, grandmother. Sebastian put down the letter, picked up the ledger. It was empty, waiting for them to fill it. "She's gone," Ella said softly. "She gave us everything she had left." They stood in the impossible room, holding a ledger that would document their choices, and felt the weight of what they'd been given. Not magic. Not a happy ending. Just permission to write their own story. The bells began to ring. Midnight. The palace was closing. We should go, Sebastian said. Wait. Ella walked to one of the shelves, found what she was looking for, a glass slipper. Sitting among all the other evidence of people who'd been invisible, who'd been given one night of being seen. She picked it up, turned it in her hands. Then she placed it back on the shelf. I don't need it anymore, she said. Let it be evidence for whoever comes next. They left the room, walked through the collapsing palace, out into the ordinary night. Behind them, the palace shimmered and disappeared. The between space closed. And Ella and Sebastian stood on the empty street, holding a ledger in each other, ready to write the next chapter. Epilogue. 5 years later, the bookstore had expanded. Ella owned it now. The previous owner had retired and sold it to her at a price that was more gift than transaction. It was thriving community events, author readings, a small cafe in the back corner. Sebastian worked there part-time. His memory was still imperfect. He forgot faces, needed extensive documentation, relied heavily on systems and routines. But he'd learned to work with his curse rather than against it. He managed the bookstore's social media, took photographs of events, documented everything for the community archive he was building. He still read his journal about Ella every morning. Some mornings, she was immediately clear. Other mornings, he had to work to bring her into focus. But he always did the work. They'd gotten married 2 years ago. Small ceremony, close friends only. Ella had worn a simple dress. No magic, no glass slippers, just fabric and choice. Sebastian had written his vows in his journal the night before, so he wouldn't forget them. They'd recorded the ceremony so he could watch it whenever he needed to remember why he'd chosen her. They didn't have children. They'd talked about it, decided against it. Sebastian's curse wasn't genetic, but the fear of forgetting his own child was too much. And Ella was content building, other things community. Connection, a bookstore that welcomed people who felt invisible. The Ledger grandmother had given them sat in their apartment, nearly full now. 5 years of entries. Choices documented. Love rendered in careful handwriting and deliberate memory. On the 5th anniversary of the ball, they went looking for the palace. It didn't appear. They stood where it should have been, waiting, listening for bells that never came. Maybe it's gone, Ella said. Maybe grandmother was the only thing holding it together. Or maybe it only appears when someone needs it. Sebastian suggested. Someone invisible who's owed a debt. I hope someone finds it. I hope whoever needs it gets their night. They walked home through the cold autumn evening. Past shops and restaurants and all the ordinary places where people built their lives. The city was the same as it had always been. Harsh and beautiful, indifferent and full of possibility. When they got home, Sebastian read his journal like he did every night, reminded himself who Ella was, what they meant to each other, why he kept choosing her. Ella made tea, sat by the window, looked at her reflection, solid, present, real. She existed, not because of magic, because she'd chosen to exist, repeatedly and deliberately, until it became true. That night, they opened the ledger and added a new entry. Year 5. Still here. Still choosing each other. Still building our own magic through will and work and stubborn refusal to disappear. The palace didn't appear tonight, but that's okay. We don't need it anymore. We've built our own palace out of ordinary days and deliberate choices. This is what happens after the fairy tale ends. This is what comes next when you refuse the binary of happily ever after or tragedy. This is the real story. Two people who were cursed in different ways, learning to be human together. Learning that visibility and memory aren't gifts. They're practices. Things you build and maintain and choose every single day. We're still here. We're still real. We still matter. And tomorrow, we'll choose each other again. They closed the ledger, went to bed, held each other in the dark. And in the morning, when Sebastian woke up and couldn't quite remember the woman sleeping beside him, he read his journal, looked at photographs, reminded himself who she was. Then he chose her again. Because that's what love was. Not magic, but choice, repeated until it became truth. Not a fairy tale ending, just a real one. And that was enough, teach Ian.